I will call this meeting of the Planning Commission of February 5th, 2025 to order. Madam Secretary, can we have a roll call, please?
Member Bedard?
Here.
Member Lee? Member Lee?
Present.
Member Mead? Here. Member McPhail?
Here.
And Chair Malakoff?
Here.
Let the record show that we have a quorum.
We need to get you a louder microphone. I think that's the problem.
Now, we will stand for the Pledge of Allegiance to our great country. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, do we have any changes to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Okay, then we'll move on to public comments. Public is invited to address the Planning Commission on any matter that's not on the agenda. If you wish to speak on an agenda item, please wait to be recognized under that item. Except for special circumstances, the Brown Act prohibits the Planning Commission or staff from responding or taking action on any comments made by the public unless it pertains to an item that appears on the agenda. All speakers should give their name and city of residence. Please limit your remarks to 3 minutes. Did we receive any speaker slips?
I have not received any speaker slips this evening.
I didn't hear you.
No speaker slips have been received.
Okay. And then the next item is approval of minutes. Do we have a motion for the approval of the December 4th meeting minutes? Do we have a motion and a second?
Move approval.
I will second.
All right, let the record show that a motion has been made and seconded, and the motion passes 4-0.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Our first public hearing item is a conditional use permit 24-0002. Recommend approval of a conditional use permit 24002 to operate a used auto sales business within a 108 square foot office of an existing 5,300 square foot auto repair building within the PCC Planned Community Commercial Zoning District. Mr. Rocha, do we have a staff report?
Good evening. Yes, we do. Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Manuel Rocha, Assistant Planner here at the City of Cathedral City. I bring before you conditional use permit number 24-0002 to operate a used auto sales business within a 108 square foot office of an existing 5,300 square foot auto repair building by the applicant Noe Galan Garcia. The proposed project is located at 68750 Ramon Road, Building 2. The yellow outline you see here is the area applicable to this project. However, the red outline shows the entire commercial center where this building is located. The property is zoned planned community commercial with the general plan designation of general commercial. The site is bounded by public streets on 3 sides: Ramon Road, Avenida Juarez, and Aliso Road. The commercial site was approved under CUP 94-204. This approval included the construction of an automobile sales facility, 2 auto repair facilities, and an outdoor display area. The entire commercial center is approximately 1.3 acres in size and was constructed 30 years ago. CUP 94-204 required for a total of 34 parking stalls to support all uses within the commercial center. At the time of the review for CUP 94-204, the parking calculations accounted for all shops, offices, and car display. And this is the site plan from the original approval for your guys' reference. The applicant is proposing to operate a used auto sales business within an existing office located in the auto repair building. As shown on the site plan, the applicant is proposing to use 3 of the 34 spaces for vehicle display. The required 34 parking spaces under CUP 94-204 are adequate for the proposed auto sales addition and all other uses within the commercial site. So staff has analyzed the site and noted that a few of the originally proposed parking stalls under CUP 94-204 have been relocated on the site. Specifically, so the neighboring business Bravo's Auto World has relocated a few of these parking stalls. As you can see here, I have made the changes on the plan, showing where the 34 parking spaces now exist. However, one issue that we did encounter when I went out to the site is that the stalls that are located here are dedicated for the business use. However, they're not striped. Staff is recommending that a condition of approval be added today by the Planning Commission to require for the applicant to provide a revised site plan depicting a minimum of 34 parking spaces, including the 8 parking spaces within the converted vehicle display area and 2 disabled parking spaces along the east boundary. In addition to a second condition requiring for the applicant to stripe the 8 parking spaces with the converted vehicle display area for customer parking to be completed prior to issuance of a final inspection of occupancy. Each space shall be a minimum of 9 feet in width and by 19 feet in depth. As shown on the floor plan, Building 2 consists of 4,835 square feet of bay service area and 465 square feet of office space. There are 4 offices located within the building. The existing office located at the rear of Bay 1 will be used as an auto sales office, which is located here, where my cursor is. Yes, so here you'll see a few photos of the existing building and parking area where the auto sales will be operating out of. As mentioned, the building is currently occupied by the applicant with his auto repair service business. Here you'll see a photo of the auto sales office. Solely used cars will be sold here. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. There will be one salesman, which is the owner, Noe Galan. As discussed, staff recommends that the following conditions of approval be considered by the Planning Commission to be added. 3.19 would be within 30 days of the project approval, the applicant shall provide a revised site plan depicting a minimum of 34 parking spaces, including the 8 parking spaces within the covered vehicle display area and 2 disabled parking spaces along the east boundary. 3.20, an additional condition would be prior to issuance of a final inspection for occupancy, the applicant shall stripe the 8 parking spaces within the converted vehicle display area for customer parking. Each space shall measure a minimum of 9 feet in width by 19 feet in depth. So staff recommends that the Planning Commission find that the project is exempt from CEQA pursuant to section number 15301, class 1, existing facilities, and approve conditional use permit number 240002, subject to the attached conditions of approval as revised and based on the findings contained in the staff report. That concludes my presentations. I'm available for questions, and the applicant is also here.
Thank you, Mr. Rocha. Are there any questions from the commission for Mr. Rocha? Commissioner McPhail.
First of all, I want to thank Mr. Rocha for very promptly responding to a couple of minor questions I had regarding the parking issue. So thanks very much for that, and you amended your presentation accordingly. Just had a couple of tiny little questions, just trying to understand the business here. So as you showed in the presentation and the map that's up there right now, there's two little offices at the back of one of the bays of the building, one of which will be the sales office. And the rest of it, as you showed in the picture, is a smog check bay that will presumably have cars and things in it. Will there be customers who will be walking in and we have no problems about path of travel or anything like that to go in?
Correct. So Bay 1 doesn't have a lift in it, so there is a walkable path to the back office.
And so this business is going to have just 3 display spaces for cars and then 1 more for customers as well. So it's really 4 spaces
Yes.
that are kind of reserved for this business. So they're just going to have 3 autos on display. Okay. And if they had more than 3 cars, where might they go?
So the applicant is, in discussing with him, he mentioned they would only be 3 vehicles at a time, so
Okay.
yeah, that should not be an issue.
And you talked a bit about the parking, showing us now a sort of revised map with 34 parking spaces, and then 4 will be for this business, leaving, I guess, 30 for the overall site. And we're okay with our calculations with there being 30 left. That doesn't trigger any issues or anything. 30 is an okay number.
Yeah, that is correct. So the original approval for CUP 94-204 analyzed the parking that would be required. And the office is existing, so they're not intensifying the use and they're not adding additional space, so the parking is sufficient.
And then just finally, one of the conditions in the CUP is in regard to the 6 parcels that make up this plan. And then 30 years ago, they were asked to merge them into 1 parcel, and for whatever reason that didn't happen. So I guess this time round, we're requiring it again, and I'm just wondering, is there some time limit on this, on them to do it, and will the city be making sure they do it this time?
Yes, so planning does require a final inspection. So this would be required to be completed before that final inspection is completed.
Thank you very much.
Are there any other questions from staff?
I just had one quick question. Are all these businesses on the entire lot owned by the same owner, or are the Bravos owned by a different owner?
So Bravo, so it's an LLC owns all 6 parcels.
Okay.
So applicant, so there's 2 owners. It's all owned under an LLC, but there's 2 separate individuals
Got
in
it.
that LLC, which is Noe Galan, who's the applicant for these 2 properties, and then there's a separate owner who typically manages these other 4 properties.
Okay, but it's all one property owner?
Correct.
Okay, because my concern was you were taking spaces away from someone else, but if it's all one owner, then it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. That was it, thanks.
Any other questions?
Just to follow up on Commissioner McPhail's point about the access to the office, and you and I talked about it earlier, but is there any marking or anything that will guide people walking in that area? Will they, for example, paint a path on the floor?
So from the Bay Area, from the entrance of the Bay Area, I did not see any when I went to the site. However, I believe that the applicant could probably speak more in terms of if they have any walkable path in the back of the Bay Area.
Okay. Do you know if there's any applicable health and safety measures or ordinances that apply to this type of access?
Not to my knowledge. And if there are, I'm sure they were originally reviewed when this site was constructed.
But there was no, there were no public passing through this shop before.
Well, the offices are existing, so the offices have been there, and they've,
Right.
yeah.
No,
So,
it's the access that bothers me just for safety reasons.
yeah, I agree.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner, staff will review the path of travel, and if it requires painting, it can be painted if it's applicable.
Good. Okay. Do we need to add that as a condition?
You may, if you don't feel the conditions address that.
Well, isn't the path of travel dictated by the code and the building code, and the chief building official would be responsible for
Yes.
making that happen during plan check?
Correct, and in this case, the chief building official will take primacy on this, because Public Works looked at this and we felt that it was all, really, it's almost a enclosed compound structure, so it's more applicable for the chief building official to make that determination.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, then I will open the public hearing. If there's any members of the public, do we have any speaker cards? I don't think we do.
We have no speaker cards, but I believe the applicant.
Okay, would the applicant like to make any comments? Okay. And there's no further public comments, so then I will close the public hearing and bring the item back to the commission for discussion. And if there's do we have any other questions or comments? And I'm going to do it a little bit differently than I have in the past. And I am going to start with Commissioner Mead.
It seems pretty straightforward to me. I don't have any major concerns or comments.
Commissioner Lee.
No, I have no other comments.
Commissioner McPhail.
No further questions?
And Commissioner Bedard.
I just want to congratulate the local business. It's awesome to see that we're growing and that they're working with our community. And I think it's just very good, positive movement, and I'm sure we all agree with that.
Hold on. The only comment I have is, again, I like to see business be able to flourish in a streamlined way. I think one of the things that we should consider when we update the code is that oftentimes the sale of used cars is different now than it was 20 years ago or 30 years ago. So sometimes you might have an insurance broker or auto repair shop that might want to get a license to sell used cars, but they're not going to be selling 100 cars. They might just sell a few cars, and they have to have one for display space based on what the DMV requires. And I think that the way the code was written was for a larger auto dealership, not one of this size, not one for a repair shop that's going to offer sale one or two cars. And so I think that when we do look at the code, we should look at maybe used cars as an accessory use that wouldn't require a CUP, and it would just require staff review of the required space by DMV. I think that would streamline things for small businesses, and then we provide the larger hearing and larger examination for somebody that would have a larger facility. And that's my only comment. So with that, I'm going to reopen the public hearing and invite the applicant up.
Hello, my name is Eddie Galan. I'm representing Noe. He's my dad. I just wanted to comment on the parcels. I do understand that there's 6 and that Noe owns 2. For over 15 years, we've been working with Ozzy, which is the owner of Bravos, and there haven't been any issues with the parcels, which is why we haven't merged them into one. I just wanted to make that comment that there haven't been any issues, and a part of the, I believe on his side of the parcel, the driveway is there. That's why it's not one parcel.
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Appreciate your comment and wish you good luck in your endeavor.
Thank you.
I'll close the public hearing. Are there any other comments, or would the commission like to entertain a motion?
So just to clarify then, it was said, I believe, that these parcels were supposed to be merged. We heard that according to the owner, that that's not going to happen, it sounds like, because they don't feel like they need to. Where do we stand on that then?
So, Commissioner Bedard, if I may speak. I believe he was just commenting, would you guys to potentially consider not requesting them to merge the parcels? Not that it was not going to happen. I think that's what he
Okay,
attempted to do.
so is that a formal request to actually take our request to merge it that was established some time ago off the table, or?
Well, merging parcels tends to be something when an application comes in, and staff will actually generate a lot of that on CUPs like this and say merge the parcels if they see a potential challenge in the future. In this case, it's probably unnecessary, and you have the ownership under the same people in a particular area, and then you have the divided ownership between the two. There's never been any issues, so it's almost a redundant task at this point in time. If in the future in a CUP and we see there's a challenge and they come in with a CUP, then we can absolutely require it.
Could I just ask you to review the history of that process? Because as I understood it, that it was a failure of registration, that the process had already gone through.
So, come on, Vice Chair Lee. So, in speaking with our consultant engineer, who was actually around at that time, in 1995, he mentioned that the file was created, however, it was never completed. So, they did apply, it was reviewed by city staff, however, there's a process where the map has to be recorded with the county, which was never completed, and that's where it got lost.
So if I can just add to that, Chairman, so the documents were properly created and acceptable to the city. They just, for whatever reason, did not record, and it appears as if they did go to the recorder's office because there's a number on it, but there's no record of it recording, and you still see the 6 separate parcels when you look at parcel ownership today.
So it seems to me that we should just get that done, since it was an original condition. I don't see anything that's changed that would prevent us from doing that.
What would be the benefit? What is the benefit to the city of having it merged? That if someone came in and they wanted to buy the whole parcel to be able to build on the whole parcel, that they could do that? I mean, is there any other benefit?
Someone could buy both parcels and still develop it.
Right.
And create something on there that may not require being merged. Let's say right now you actually have 2 separate businesses divided. Actually, it's divided perfectly in a parking lot, so you could have 2 different parcels there as operating 2 different businesses. So the merging, in this case, it's kind of an option and for the owner, and like I said, there's nothing that's compelling to do it on this one because right now you have options with the 2. Once you merge it, the whole parcel becomes one, and splitting already merged parcel has to go through the whole entitlement process again.
Would we, okay, so if the parcel merger never happened, and assuming that they required a parcel merger back in the day, they probably didn't require an ingress-egress agreement either between the 4 lots. So given the history, maybe it's a city attorney question, given the history, would we need to have an ingress-egress agreement, or would the historical facts of what's happened over the past 25 years negate the need for that? Because theoretically, somebody could block off access between one of the lots.
Manuel, will you confirm that CC&Rs are existing on the property, already recorded, granting reciprocal access and parking?
That is correct.
Well, okay, no, I appreciate that. There's just a lot of.
So that would address the concern.
Let's address the CC&Rs and then I'll reopen the public hearing. So we have CC&Rs on the property that would guarantee ingress-egress, so we don't need to worry about that if the parcels were not merged. Okay, and now I believe the applicant has something he wants to add, so I'm going to reopen the public hearing and call the applicant back up.
my name is Andrea Galan. I represent my dad as well. So I'm involved in the family business. One thing we did want to add is that my dad and Ozzy just acquired buying the property in 2021. So 30 years ago, we did not know about the merger, that there was supposed to be that. We weren't aware of it up until last week. So it was not my dad and Ozzy who decided not to merge the lots. But they've discussed it and they still believe that there's not really much of a benefit, but if needed, we'll do whatever it takes to get the approval. That's it. Thank you.
Mr. Director Firestein.
So I think you've heard comments from multiple staff, and I think just to clarify the comments you're hearing from staff, this is not a condition that we believe in strongly. I think in terms of how to move this application forward and support the applicant's request, this is something that I think we can let go in the interest of offering an efficient, streamlined process that is responsive to the applicant. We don't need this condition.
Okay.
I would agree. So can we strike the stuff? Can we just say that old condition we don't need anymore and let's just take it off the books so this doesn't drag on for them years down the road?
Yes.
So the maker of the motion should reference in their motion that they're going to strike the previous condition of approval to require a lot merger.
And add the other two.
And of course, to add the other two. So if there's no more discussion, does somebody want to make a motion with the 3 notes?
Nobody's quite sure how to say it. So let's try this.
I would do it,
So-
but I'm not supposed to.
I would move that we find that the project is exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to section number 15301, class number 1, existing facilities, and approve the conditional use permit number 24002, subject to the attached conditions of approval, and including the 2 conditions presented by staff during this discussion, removing condition number
3.1.
3.1 as revised and based on the findings contained in the staff report.
Do we have a second?
Second.
And all in favor? Use the voting machine.
Possibly.
It's not letting us move and second things.
Yeah, I haven't got the
Doesn't really
little
matter.
move and second bubbles.
I'll have to make a note of that. I'm not sure why it's doing that.
I just lost my...
Oh, your screen's
And it's my fault. If Justin can come out.
listening.
Thank you. I don't know why I didn't know how to do that.
Did we all vote?
I think so. And the motion passes 5-0. Just as a point of order, I believe at the last commission, we were told that you could refer to the motion in the staff report, just so you know. And that makes things a lot easier.
I prefer the exercise.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity, could the clerk indicate who made the motion and who made the second? It's not reflected.
It is not reflected, so let the record show that, and I actually did miss the second, so let the record show that a motion was made by Member Lee, and it was seconded by, thank you, by Member McPhail, and the motion passed 5-0.
I also want to note that in the conditions of approval, there appears to be an enumeration error. This is condition 3.1 that was referenced in the motion, although it is listed after condition 3.17. So that may have been a typographical error, but I believe that you've identified it correctly as 3.1.
As the city engineer would say, that would be a Scribner error.
There you go.
Okay, so we move on to non-public hearings. Our general plan progress report, part 3. Dominique?
All right, good evening, Chair Malakoff, Vice Chair Lee, and members of the Planning Commission. My name is Dom Camps, Associate Planner with the City, and today I'll be presenting Part 3 of the General Plan Annual Progress Report for your consideration, well, for information and for discussion. Oh, that's okay. Okay, I'll keep going. So this annual progress report is reporting on implementation of the 2040 General Plan, which was adopted in 2021. This progress report is being prepared for submittal to the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation, formerly known as the Office of Planning and Research, and it covers the city's progress on the general plan for calendar years 2023 and 2024. There we go. Today's presentation provides Part 3 of the APR and is a continuation of Part 1 and 2, which were presented on October 16th and November 20th of 2024. Part 3 of the APR provides an update on the implementation of the remaining 3 elements of the general plan, which are open space and conservation, air quality and climate stability, and safety. Following this presentation, the full annual progress report will be presented to the City Council for review and acceptance prior to submittal to the Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. Consistent with the format that was used to present Part 1 and 2 of the APR, this presentation will focus on key areas of activity that the City has undertaken during 2023 and 2024 that are contributing to the implementation of the general plan. In this presentation, I will also provide examples of policies and programs that are being implemented through these activities. However, this presentation does not provide a comprehensive list of all the policies and programs in the 3 elements, so please see the checklist that was attached to the staff report for the full list, as well as the status and description for each of those policies and programs. So the first area of activity that I will be covering today is the preliminary review process. As discussed in Part 1 of the APR, new development proposals are subject to a comprehensive review process, including review for consistency with the general plan, zoning ordinance, and other applicable regulatory documents. When reviewing a development proposal, staff will review the existing site conditions and context to evaluate whether a site is suitable for the proposed use. The Planning Division now requests that proposals for new construction apply for a preliminary review before making a formal submittal. The City has had this preliminary review application for a while, but we have started taking greater advantage of it as a tool to enable staff in the planning, building, engineering, fire, and police departments to provide high-level feedback early in the review process. So one example of the preliminary review process is an application that was submitted for the Ramon Road commercial project. This project proposes the construction of a new commercial development, including a 1,500 square foot drive-through restaurant and a 2,500 square foot commercial building with 2 tenants. The project site is surrounded by similar commercial uses to the west, but residential uses to the north and to the east. So through the preliminary review process, it was determined that the proposed location of the drive-through on the east side of the property could generate a noise issue for the adjacent residential properties. Staff recommended that the site configuration be rotated so that the drive-through would be located on the west side of the property, closer to the existing commercial uses and farther from the residences. The preliminary review process enabled staff to provide high-level design feedback early in the review process for the Ramon Road commercial project, and also supported the implementation of general plan programs, such as Noise Program 1G in the safety element, which states that parking lots, loading zones, and large trash bins shall be located the greatest distance practicable from adjacent residential properties and designed in a manner that reduces associated noise impacts to levels allowable by the city's noise ordinance. The next activity area that I will be highlighting in this presentation is the environmental review process. When staff review new development proposals, the planning staff assess what level of environmental review might be needed for the project. This assessment is based on the preliminary review application or project submittal, as well as using the environmental information form that is provided to applicants through the CSS portal during the application process. Based on the scope of the development, the proposed location and use, and whether there are previous approvals for the project, a preliminary determination will be made whether an initial study or environmental impact report will be required, or whether the project is potentially eligible for an exemption. Land uses that generate negative externalities such as traffic, noise, or odors may warrant additional environmental review, particularly when proposed in proximity to sensitive uses. And site-specific analysis might also be required when projects are proposed in areas with known environmental sensitivities, such as cultural significance for the Agua Caliente, or with known critical habitat for protected species. So, for example, an initial study was recently adopted for the Wren, a proposed 204-unit multifamily complex situated on an 11-acre parcel. This project included a general plan amendment and change of zone. Because the project proposed land uses that were not analyzed as part of the general plan environmental impact report, additional environmental review was required. Various technical studies were required to support the initial study, including an air quality and GHG study, biological resources assessment, cultural resources survey, geotechnical report, hydrology study, noise impact study, and traffic study. Through the analysis of these technical studies as well as the initial study, the city was able to determine that the environmental impacts resulting from the Wren project would be less than significant with the implementation of the mitigation measures. So through this process, the city implements general plan policies, such as Program 1B, which states that, which requires cultural resource surveys when appropriate, as well as Program 4B, which requires air quality impact analysis and mitigation measures for projects with the potential to generate significant levels of air pollution. Another example is the Grove Street Apartments, which are currently under construction. The project was approved last year for the construction of a 19-unit apartment complex on a 0.6-acre site. In terms of environmental review, the project was eligible for a Class 32 categorical exemption for CEQA, which applies to infill development projects on sites that are less than 5 acres and that are consistent with the general plan and zoning ordinance and that would not result in any significant impacts related to traffic, noise, air quality, or water quality. This process allows the city to ensure that projects are consistent with CEQA as well as applicable general plan policies in the open space and conservation, air quality, and safety elements while applying a more streamlined environmental review process when applicable. The third activity area that I will be highlighting in this presentation is interagency collaboration. Collaboration with community organizations as well as local, regional, and state agencies is an essential component of implementing the city's goals across all of the general plan elements, including conservation, air quality, and safety. CVEG, the Coachella Valley Association of Governments, is one important avenue through which the city collaborates with other local and regional governments or agencies on issues related to air quality and transportation. The engineering department regularly cooperates with CVEG as well as neighboring cities and flood control agencies on regional projects such as the construction of bridges and CV Link. CVEG is also currently working with the cities in the Coachella Valley to create a regional comprehensive climate action plan that will include greenhouse gas reduction strategies that are applicable at the local level. Collaborative projects such as the Regional Climate Action Plan support the implementation of Policy 1 and the air quality element, which states that the city shall cooperate with CVEG as well as the South Coast Air Quality Management District to assure compliance with air quality standards. Another example of interagency collaboration are activities undertaken by the fire department. In 2024, the fire department initiated the process of updating the city's local hazard mitigation plan and emergency operations plan. The process of updating these plans will involve stakeholder engagement with relevant local and regional agencies, potentially including the county, neighboring cities, community organizations, as well as organizations representing vulnerable groups. The fire department also regularly engages with local schools and community organizations to provide emergency preparedness information. For example, the department offers a teen community emergency response team CERT program to high school students with the aim of empowering the youth community members to practice essential emergency preparedness and response skills. The local hazard mitigation plan update process will contribute to the implementation of programs in the safety element, such as Program 5A, which states that the city shall coordinate with Riverside County, Desert Water Agency, CVWD, and other agencies and utilities in the development and dissemination of information and instructions on appropriate actions in the event of local disaster or emergency. The Teen CERT program contributes to the implementation of programs such as Program 5B, which states that the city shall coordinate with local schools and appropriate public agencies to ensure that they are adequately prepared for and are part of citywide and regional emergency response when disaster strikes. The fourth and final theme that I'm highlighting in today's presentation is GIS mapping. The city's MIS department manages the Cathedral City Public GeoHub and Staff GeoHub, which are online GIS maps displaying information pertinent to various city departments, including planning, building, engineering, and public works. The Staff GeoHub displays geographic data from federal and state agencies, such as the FEMA flood hazard zones and the Alquist Priolo earthquake fault zones. It also displays data specific to Cathedral City, such as the city's zoning and general plan land use map, the master roadway classification map, and mapping of the location of parks and open space throughout the city. As discussed in the preliminary review and environmental review sections of this presentation, staff review new development proposals to prevent conflicting land uses or significant environmental impacts. This review considers whether a site is located within or in proximity to the boundary of a multiple species habitat conservation plan conservation area, or whether it is located within the known habitat for protected species. These maps support the implementation of general plan programs such as Program 1 in the open space and conservation element, which states that through the Coachella Valley Conservation Commission, the city shall maintain an accurate and regularly updated map of sensitive plant and animal species and habitat in Cathedral City and its planning area. The GeoHub also includes mapping of hazard zones which support staff decision-making. So for example, the city's truck route map designates routes appropriate for the transport of hazardous materials and waste. That's shown on the far left here. And mapping of fire hazard severity zones and flood hazard zones are important information for the fire department as the local hazard mitigation plan is updated in order to map critical infrastructure and evacuation routes in relation to these hazard zones. These maps support the implementation of general plan programs such as Policy 4 in the safety element, which states that the city shall designate appropriate access routes to facilitate the transport of hazardous and toxic materials and wastes, as well as Program 1B in the geotechnical sub-element, which states that the city shall establish and maintain a GIS database and mapping of the various geotechnical conditions, hazards, and constraints in the city. And that concludes my summary of key activities underway to implement the open space and conservation, air quality and climate stability, and safety elements of the general plan. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission receive Part 3 of the 2023-2024 General Plan Annual Progress Report for information and discussion, and I would be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Camp. Do we have any questions or comments? We'll start with Commissioner Lee.
Me, okay. There were a lot of things in the detail of this that I would have wanted to talk about, and there's a couple I'll just ask you about in case you have information. I think Director Corella may have the answers I'm looking for. One of the things is mentioned a couple of times in there is the CV Link project, and I've been happy to use some sections of it so far. I'm just wondering how much of the project is left in Cathedral City to complete.
Essentially, excuse me, they probably have about 2 more months to finish up the Cathedral City portions between Vista Chino all the way down to actually where we just expanded the bridge on Day Palm Drive. There is a lacking portion, but it's not in this phase because there was a lot of complications with it, to continue it south parallel to our project that expanded the bridge, but it wasn't expanded enough for CV Link. They didn't react fast enough, and we gave them the opportunity. So they're going to have to figure out how to get another bridge over that small North Cathedral channel and then follow the channel all the way to behind the auto dealerships on behind the Ford dealership there, and then basically terminate at the Rancho Mirage city limits.
Will the Ramon Bridge project allow the linking of CV Link north and south of Ramon?
So the Ramon Road Bridge project has an access point. It didn't work out so that it's right there, but on the north side, you're going to be able to access the CV Link, the north side of Ramon Road Bridge. As you're coming south, you have the option to go on Ramon Road or you go underneath the Ramon Road Bridge.
Oh, so there will be an underpass.
To go east on Ramon Road, you'll have to go up to the first intersection, San Luis Rey, cross the street there, go on the widened 8-foot sidewalk already in place on the south side of the street, and then the Ramon Road Bridge will actually have a multi-use path built into the bridge. Not necessarily CV Link monikered, but it is a multi-use path. Significant size, 8 feet. It's very similar to what we have on our Cathedral Canyon Bridge, to be able to get to basically the intersection of Ramon and Landau. Now, Landau has bike lanes going north and south. Ramon Road doesn't. Ramon Road has a share of the lanes, doesn't have a designated bike path on it. That's a long-term work in progress because there's really not enough room to widen Ramon at this point in time.
Okay. Sorry, didn't want to go so far off your presentation.
You asked me, so you got a long answer.
Yeah. I should know by now, shouldn't I? Back to the actual update. So, and I noticed that there's no, as it says in your preamble, there is no standard for how this information is presented. I'm wondering about things like where it says that something is continuous, but there's no specific goal. How will that be resolved? And similarly, if something is past due, there's one item that says it was due between 2018 and 2020, and hasn't been finished. So how do we get those things updated? How do we deal with those?
For things that are past due and haven't been completed, I suppose we have a new opportunity in 2025 to implement those policies and programs. For continuous items, I suppose it depends. I would think the ones that are labeled as continuous are things that either require regular updating or are simply sort of practices that staff should employ on an ongoing basis. So for the next progress report, I imagine if those things are still being done on a regular basis or are still updated regularly, they would still be marked as ongoing.
So probably in future updates, what we'd be able to tell us progress from the notes section that you've got there.
Yes,
I'm just trying to
that's
figure out
correct.
how do we know if anything's happening.
I think both in the descriptions and also items that are currently no action. Hopefully some of those can move into the ongoing or complete section next year.
So to build on to that, this really is a baseline, and Dom's done an exemplary job putting this baseline together. This is an annual update, and this is meant to maintain accountability of the implementation of our general plan. So, I think this is where we're starting, and you're going to see this again in a few months. Hopefully, this will be a more condensed presentation the next go-around, but this is our starting point. We have not done this before in this format before, but we're looking at this as an instrument, as a tool for us to track our performance and to continue this discussion. So
this is actually going to be your Sisyphus moment. You're going to be permanently doing this, pushing this uphill,
So it begins,
only for it to
yeah.
roll down again. Okay. Yeah, and I think one other item I did want to, it does mention Measure W, which of course now has passed, and I wonder if there are we haven't got any revenue from it yet. Is there any update from planning on what's happening with that?
So Measure W would only indirectly affect us. I think this has a more direct impact on police, fire, public works, on the PACE and the community center.
Yeah, and once again, Measure W, right off the bat, you're going to see this at the council meeting. We're doing an agreement with DRD to take over the park maintenance. And also, we're apportioning in the CIP budget $1 million for residential street paving.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
There you go.
And again, apologies if we got off track. Anyway, thank you. And yeah, I do recognize this Herculean effort. It's amazing to see this way overdue, and I'm so glad you're doing it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I particularly like the reference to Sisyphus. And I actually know who he was.
I went to school with him.
Commissioner Mead?
I don't have anything other than just to say great job. It's really just, I think, great to see all the stuff the city is doing and has incorporated into their processes, and very good job.
Thank you.
Commissioner Bedard?
Yeah, so I love this, and a lot of what's being presented today really is about the quality of life in our great city, and teen preparedness, earthquake preparedness, fire zones, all of the CV link, all that type of stuff. I'm curious, there's a big push in Riverside County, and I know locally Palm Springs and Coachella are involved in the Blue Zones program. It seems to make sense that this type of thing that we're doing here link up with Blue Zone programs. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Is that for sort of longevity of?
It's all that. It's improving people's working situations, housing situations, food stability, all of that type of stuff. Everything from mental health to actual medical care and things of that sort. I believe almost every city in our valley here is associated with the Blue Zone program except for Cathedral City. I know it's pretty big as a push in Palm Springs and pretty big in Coachella, but it's something that Riverside University is pushing as well as in conjunction with the county. And it just seems like there's probably a lot of resources we could probably piggyback on through that. And I'm just putting it out there as a potential for us to maybe get resources, maybe get tie-ins, maybe somehow support that endeavor. Ultimately is what is being presented here is about the same thing, maybe applied differently.
That's interesting. I hadn't seen any of the Blue Zone materials from the neighboring cities, but I'll have to investigate to see what they're doing and what we can learn.
It's pretty interesting, and I know there's a big push, especially with the university health system, so, yeah. It's super interesting. It's primarily about longevity. It's a couple of people that did research 20, maybe even more years ago, and found that there's certain places in the world that they ended up calling blue zones where people had a higher quality of life. Happiness was rated as, it was when we were just starting to measure happiness in communities. Happiness was higher, people's diets were healthier, people lived longer, the life that they did live was healthier, and they're called blue zones. I don't know how, but one of the original blue zones that was recognized was Loma Linda, which is surprising with their air quality. I mean, I know ours isn't so great, and theirs is really all of the exhaust that's blown off, from the Los Angeles basin. So it's interesting that Loma Linda has been on that list. And I know it's a big push. It's been many years. It's quite well established. It could be something pretty interesting to link up with.
That's interesting, thank you.
Commissioner McPhail?
I wanted to add my appreciation of the work you've done in these 3 phases as well. You've got a great framework, I hope, and for the future, hopefully it'll be easier to update as we were talking about ways to update these indicators. I also wanted to say, as a former GIS nerd in my past life, I really appreciate the GeoHub that's been developed, and there's also now information about our developments as well that are in there. I've had people ask me, now that I have this out, what's going on with this development over there? Go and look in this hub, so that's really good. I guess I just had one tiny little question, comment about, I think it was an air quality, Program 5B, it said, site plan shall incorporate energy efficient design, including possibility for incorporation of active and or passive solar design. And I was just wondering, in what's happening in Cathedral City so far, do we have any examples of, is it like when a developer comes for this preliminary review, is that something that's suggested to them? Like, hey, you could have, your parking structure could have solar panels. I was wondering about examples where that would maybe come in, active, passive solar design. Has that come up yet, I wonder?
In terms of sort of passive parts of solar design, I think the preliminary review process would be sort of the appropriate place for us to recommend that. I haven't been in any projects where that's come up explicitly. The solar panels would be a bit separate because there are, state requirements with Title 24 that mandate exactly when they're required and how much energy they need to produce. So that would be sort of covered separately, and when the building and safety team reviews plans, they make sure those requirements are being met.
Thank you.
May I jump on that, Chair? So the solar requirements that have been put in by the state are super minimal, and the amount of energy produced barely, it won't even cover your average household as far as their daily energy input. Is there room for Cathedral City to set the bar higher?
Room, yes, but I think this should be a balanced discussion. And I think as we look at changes at the state level, and I'm thinking more on the residential side with net energy metering, there have been substantial changes that have impacted the, say, financial side of solar, and it can be costly. So I think as we look at requirements like that, it is important to look at balance and just what we're requiring that is adding cost to a project and whether that is rendering development infeasible.
Yeah, I've had homeowners who bought new homes that had the solar panels say, I wish I was able to, the time I'm building my home, that if I would have added just like a couple thousand more to the cost, I would have had a full solar system that would have powered my entire home. And to make that option available through a developer. And wind energy is home residential wind is fascinating. It's super quiet. The machines are producing actually more power than solar now. And they're literally like these tulip shaped, they're very pretty, these very interesting shaped. It's not like the big giant blades that you see, or like literally a little home windmill. They're actually super passive, blow on or can turn on one of the stillest days and still produce energy. And they're actually quite decorative now, which is very interesting to see how they have these patterns. A high school kid developed a pattern for a windmill and won all kinds of awards for it because it's literally producing more energy than any windmill ever done. So, and these are small, 3 foot tall, maybe 16-inch wide.
So program
Energy
5.B, this may be something to put a pin in, bookmark. And as we get into the zoning code update, this may be something for us to analyze with our zoning code consultant. And the second part of this is the use of shade trees too. And I know this is something we want to take a look at, maybe part of the zoning code update. We also submitted a grant application that is looking at how we can obtain additional resources to look at our landscape code and those regulations. This is provoking. I think this is thought-provoking and something for us to explore a little bit more, but I would suggest a balanced approach and just understanding the financial impacts of adding requirements.
Absolutely, and maybe a developer would be too costly to ask a developer to do it. And if we could ask for a package, like, okay, if you want to get more solar on your house, you could do this. Or, it's right now, as far as wind energy, a lot of cities just don't know how to do it. And so any people that generally would like to get, say, a small wind turbine on their home, the cities don't even have the knowledge of how to even approach that when somebody comes in and asks for it. So there's things that would be kind of cool. I think we're very progressive and a major leader, and I want our city to be that. So I throw these things out there not to put pressure that they have to be done, but to say, hey, it's a time to really think about that, and how can we be a little more progressive we've been having discussions, Andrew, about those trees and stuff like that for a while, but other things too, so, yes.
Okay, any more questions? Then thank you, Ms. Camps, appreciate your hard work. And we'll move on to item 4B, which is the Zoning Code Update Steering Committee. Do we have a staff report?
Good evening. Chairman, Planning Commission member, Cynthia Schultz, Associate Planner. So the item before you this evening is request for members to serve on the steering committee for the zoning code update. I've begun calling it the development code so that the name of the project actually aligns with the purpose of facilitating development rather than simply regulating it. You may hear the terms, however, used interchangeably. The development code is underway. We kicked off the process on January 23rd with a consultant and have set out an ambitious schedule to draft and adopt the code within an 18 to 24 month period. The development code includes several options for a variety of engagement opportunities, including commission and council workshops, committees, public open houses, walking tours, including online participation as well. One of those opportunities before you this evening in the form of an invitation to join the steering committee. The steering committee is a body of community leaders both inside and outside the city organization who are charged with the development code project charged with leading the development code project through issues as they invariably arise and keep the project on track for a successful adoption. The steering committee will be complemented by a technical advisory committee comprised of a cross-section of city staff who will also ensure that guidance and direction is written in a manner which is understandable and achievable. The steering committee will meet 6 times, beginning with the first meeting in person, which we anticipate in March. 5 additional virtual meetings will follow. A member from City Council and 2 members from the Architectural Review Committee have been selected. Additional members are anticipated from the Agua Caliente Tribal Council or their designee, a possible business appointment, as well as city leadership, including from our Economic Development and Public Works departments. So we are looking for 1 or 2 members of the Planning Commission to join the steering committee.
Thank you, Ms. Schultz. Now we can have discussion on the appointment of 1 or 2 members. I'd like to throw my hat in. I've had 30 years of experience in writing zoning codes, sign code updates, animal ordinances, home occupation ordinances, casita ordinances, and all sorts of other kinds of zoning issues and clarifying them in all the cities that I worked in, which include Redlands, Desert Hot Springs, and Cathedral City. And I'd like to serve on that committee because I think I know how to write a code so that it makes sense and give input that would make sense and that has a mid-level in streamlining, but also making sure that there are certain standards so that we get good development. So I'd like to throw my hat in the ring, and would anybody else like to throw their hat in the ring?
I'd like to ask a couple of questions before that point, if I may. For Cynthia, I guess. I just wanted to get a sense maybe of the interaction, the feedback between the different entities, such as the technical advisory group and the steering committee. The name steering committee suggests that they're in the driver's seat. So I'm wondering if they're like, they start the ball rolling, and what does the technical advisory group do, and how do the community meetings feed in to inform the discussion?
Sure, let's see if I can kind of explain how this all occurs. So right now, the consultant is taking the input that we've given them, the input that we've heard. They will do stakeholder interviews. From there, they will lay out sort of an analysis of what's wrong with the code, and then they'll start with developing a new code. We gave them some pretty specific directive with regard to what we're looking for. So what we're really looking for is a steering committee who, and I'll get to how they interact with the other boards, but a steering committee really sort of sets the direction. We'll come to some pretty primal policy questions that will need to be answered. That's why we really need to have someone from our leadership as well as someone from our city council on that board as well, so that we make sure that we're not taking this too far off of the path that city council would like it to go in. So that's really the steering committee's position. That's why I've also asked to make sure that we have someone from economic development as well as community development, public works in there as well, to sort of give it a reality check and say, okay, yes, this stays within the framework of what's appropriate development. Then how the steering committee and the TAG, or the technical advisory committee, which is really made up of staff, so it'll be staff with some engineering staff on that as well, so mostly planning. We'll be doing the reading and the reviewing of the sections as they are made available to us, and we'll also be directing some of the things. Staff is a very long laundry list of the items that we've identified that are problems with the code. We don't want to fix those problems. We want to create a new code, so I'm calling it a development code. We want to create a new code that sets the bar higher, that facilitates good development, that delivers the things that we're looking for. So we're really looking at it from sort of the perspective that Chair Malakoff was describing, looking at it from the perspective of what's a good code look like. We know what a bad code looks like. What's a good code look like? Let's make sure that this works together. So I don't envision necessarily them talking to each other, but there will be some interplay between the two, because there will be staff that is a staff liaison for both of those boards.
Will there be people who are on both the committee and the group? Like, will be staff people who might have both hats on?
Yes, probably.
And are you looking for people to be on both of those committees, or
Just on the steering committee.
Just on the
So
steering.
TAG will really be staff.
Think of TAG as boots on the ground, whereas the steering committee is much more of a policy-oriented group. There is some structure, and that is partly what Mentir Harnish is offering through this contract. There are modules, they're breaking this down into sections, so you have land use, you have design, you have the administration and operations of the code, so there are some parameters around the discussions, but really this steering committee is going to be looking at the overall vision of the community, the direction of the code within those modules, within those parameters, and ensuring that the project is on course.
Does anybody else have questions?
I have a couple more questions. Those meetings, steering group and technical advisory, are internal meetings. They're not public meetings, I assume.
That's correct.
And they'd be held probably during the working day, because I know that might be an issue for people who actually work, whether they'll be held during the working day probably.
We haven't established that, and usually, in my experience, when it comes to staff only, it's usually typically during the working day, but when it's steering committee, recognizing that those folks are usually volunteers, they usually bring together the first meeting and then try to sort of set the norms for those meetings.
I just have one suggestion before we pick people, just an administrative one perhaps. I would like to suggest, going forward as we get into this, seeing that this is a big deal for all of us, and we want to keep the wheels rolling. And I would like to suggest maybe that in our agenda that we have a new item that's like zoning code or development code update, so that staff can tell us what's happening, whoever our representatives can tell us what's happening as well, and that we who are not on those groups can offer suggestions and support the staff and commissioners who are on that group. I think it'd be good to have that.
We've talked about how we might do that. It might be a monthly update rather than...
Yeah.
I think there's also a few of us that would like to be on this committee. So are there other opportunities if we, like you say, is there a breakout committee that is going to be formed on a specific topic? That, okay, well, we don't have so many slots to put all of us in for the primary meetings, but maybe we could slot into some of the groups that are more passionate about something, or I don't know.
Yes, so we do have other opportunities that are available. One of the opportunities we were just describing this afternoon was an opportunity for the walking meetings. There'll be community design tours. We'll have those in March. I believe it's the 15th and 16th. It's a Saturday and Sunday. So there'll be 2 sessions on Saturday and a session on Sunday to really do a walking tour and look at where's really the good design, where's really the design that we don't want to see more of, and to try to get visuals of that. So that's one of those kind of tailored and focused types of meetings. We'll have some public meetings. There's also the, that's the Modernizing the Development Code workshop that's happening on the 26th of February. But there will be some other as well, but not anything probably that's as key as either the steering committee or the TAG. Those are probably going to be the most structured because they're seated, they're ongoing. With the RFP, everything is very, as Director mentioned, very structured and specific. So we really want to make sure that we have thought this out and thought this through and have set aside the time and the resources for these meetings.
I think one of the advantages that the Planning Commission has that Parks Committee and Public Works Committee and the Architectural Review Committee don't have is that the advisory committee is going to deal with the nuts and bolts and the general policies and, roll up their sleeves. But the Planning Commission will be able to review the whole thing before it goes to City Council and so regardless of whether you're on the committee or not, all 5 of us are going to get a chance to give input through the public hearing process because there'll be public hearings. I don't know how many, but there'll be public hearings at the Planning Commission where you can make comments and you can say, I'm inventing an issue. You can ask, well, why aren't there more requirements for electric vehicle spaces or something like that. So so we'll get that chance, the 5 of us, which other committees and commissions won't have.
I would also like to volunteer for one of the positions if we end up doing 2. I think having a background in especially the Hollywood Community Plan where we had everything from open space to high density to historic neighborhoods. We had just about everything in our area, which I worked on very extensively. So I think that gives me a good background in terms of all the different kinds of elements and types of development that we'd be looking at in the city, including historic preservation. I also am the kind of person who really enjoys reading lots of the long documents, and so I will make the time to actually read through all the materials. And I was interested in serving on the committee that picked the consultant, but obviously other people did that, and I think they did a great job. So I'd love the opportunity to now get involved at this point. So.
Is there anybody else that would like to throw their hat in?
Well, yeah.
Sure.
I did that like a couple months ago.
So I would just say, the 2 of us were helping with the RFP. That was an interesting process. I'm glad to have gone through that process, and certainly I would be happy to continue on this committee too. However, I'm trying to think what the planning department actually wants from the representatives. So certainly I would bring some planning experience from this committee, from other committees that I've been on in the city. I've also represented resident groups to the city on Measure B, Measure W. So if you wanted more of some residential viewpoint in that committee, then I could help with that. However, I would say for sure that one of the things you need, and you just sort of confirmed that, is that the chair would be a very useful member of that. So I
Thank you.
I would second him for one of those positions. And since Commissioner McPhail and I have been in that RFP process, I think it might be appropriate for Commissioner Mead to actually have that chance to be involved. I think she has the background. So I will bow out gracefully.
I feel the same way. I served on the RFP committee, so I think it's appropriate for one or two of our other members to, if they wish, to serve. And I don't know, Commissioner Bedard, did you say you were interested as well?
Oh, yeah, I've been talking about this for, since the beginning of last summer, so yeah. Absolutely would.
Maybe this is a good time to take the opportunity to sort of clarify the difference between a technical advisory committee and a steering committee. Steering committee, big picture, high-level policy, right? Technical advisory, boots on the ground, hands in, sleeves rolled up, big difference between those two. That's why we look at staff, people who've got experience with the code, people who've got experience counter work. You know, the folks that I work with on a day-to-day basis, including some of our engineering staff and our other staff who don't normally come to our meetings, with people who are dealing with the issues, you know, in the trenches, if you will. That's kind of the technical advisory folks. And the steering committee is looking at things like questions of, you know, where do we want to put things like mixed use in a high level? We're not looking at parcel by parcel cases, but we're looking at things like, you know, we want to have more housing, or we want to have housing in more mixed use locations. Those are the kinds of the general policy directions that the steering committee would provide, and then the consultant would take that back, write that into the code. The tag, this is a good description of how the tag then works. The tag would take that, look at that document and say, I understand where the steering committee is going with this. I understand what the consultant has written. Is it matching? Is it working? Is it coming down to, if we had to tell someone from the public, is this going to deliver the product that they've asked us for?
So is it possible to make the pie bigger? Because we have 3 people that would really like to be part of this committee?
Brown Act issues there, I might.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
exactly.
Is it a Brown Act
Yes.
Yeah, that's why we've limited to 1 or 2.
Yes.
So then how do you propose we do a process of elimination?
Well, the other, you know, I think considering it with the description that I just laid out for you, with the high-level detail and the much more hands-in, boots on the ground, sleeves rolled up detail.
Right, that's staff.
Yeah, that's more
primarily,
at the staff level. You know, it's up to you all how you want to do that. I mean, I think that, you know, everyone has expressed their interest. I don't know, I'm looking at our leadership to see if they have any suggestions for this. And I wonder if there would not be, we have some workshops in here, but they're really not high involvement workshops. They're not workshops where we're going to, again, roll up our sleeves. There are several chances for public engagement. And I think I'm going to go back to Vice Chair Lee's comment about, you know, being a neighborhood advocate and someone who can connect. That is a critically important piece. If someone has that kind of interest and skill, that it's a critical linkage, because I sit in my office all day, unfortunately, and don't have the ability to get out and really talk to people in the neighborhood who can describe what it is that we're looking for. How do we get from where we are to where we want to go? This is a tool for implementing the vision that's set out in our community plan. We could take lots of different vehicles to get there. What's the right one that we want to use? So in order to do that, we will be having public meetings. So it might be an opportunity to be extra personnel, I don't want to say staff, but extra personnel at public meetings to sort of talk with people, circulate, to invite people to meetings, to talk to folks and ask them questions, to try to get more at the nuts and bolts of what are they really looking for in this community? What do they want to see more of? What do we want to see less of? So that's another opportunity as well.
I absolutely appreciate, sorry to cut you off, I absolutely appreciate your explanation, but it's not quite answering the question. Because I think both of these people would be wonderful on the committee, and I believe I would be too. So we have 3 people that would very passionately like to be part of it. Unless one of us feels bad and backs down, then it's not going to happen, it sounds. So I'm putting it back to you, because I think we're all very viable, good candidates. So
Yeah.
what do we do? Do we draw straws?
There's several ways that you can do this, and I'll lead with my suggestion, and I'll offer an alternative as well. My suggestion is much like when you nominate a chair and vice chair. We're looking for a nomination, and we're looking for a majority of the commission that supports that nomination. That may be a way to do this openly and to allow the commission as a body to identify a member and have a majority support up for that member serving on this steering committee. The alternative is to look at a random name generator, but I think it's perhaps an easy out, and it's not the commission electing or designating by a majority support. You're leaving it to chance. So my preference would be perhaps for the commission to advance a name, and much like you select a chair and vice chair, to allow the majority to support it.
Chair, is it appropriate at this point for me to propose a motion?
Yes.
So I would move that the Planning Commission appoint the chair and Commissioner Mead to the steering committee as requested by staff.
Do we have a second?
Can I second it, even though?
Yes, you can.
I second it then.
Okay, and all in favor? Do we want to do roll call, or what do we?
Can I catch up just a moment, Mr. Chair? Give me just a moment.
Yeah, because this is an information item. Do we have a form? We're allowed to make motions and vote on an information item too, okay? Well, I feel really bad that we can't have three people
I know.
who really want to do this on it. And I don't know people's strengths well enough to have an opinion one way or the other. I think you're all very qualified, so I'm not quite sure how to progress from here.
I hold to that point that this is a very long process, and we're all going to be back in this somewhere. So,
And the other thing I would maybe add, that for the two who will be on it, again, I'd just like to reinforce the idea that we have a regular, even formal item on our agenda for the future, so that they can report back, and that those of us who are not on can make suggestions or add our 10 cents worth, so that when those commissioners go back, they can bring those concerns forward.
while we,
So then I would like to make another motion to put, I don't know how that would necessarily work. So, and I don't think this is
We only
necessarily
have one
the
motion.
best way.
Well, we have a motion on the floor.
To do this.
So we could only have one motion at a time. I was going to say I agree with you on the information item. It's similar to the city council reports, how the city council come back and they say, I went to CVAG, I went to SCAG, I attended the Sunline meeting and things like that. So I think that's a good idea of bringing back more information, and in both directions. I think we only have one motion on the floor at a time, right?
That's correct, Chair. I mean, that's generally the easiest way to keep track of the various motions.
Unless you wanted to do an amendment to the motion, we have one motion on the floor.
is the voting ready, or?
So let me just clarify that the motion, I'm sorry, I was running between posts here. So I have a motion to nominate the chair and member Mead to the steering committee. Is that correct?
Member Mead, yes.
All right. Your vote should be up.
Now it's gone away. Damn it.
Right. Let the record show that a motion was made by Vice Chair Lee, seconded by Member Mead, and the vote tally is 4 in favor and 1 opposed. The motion passes.
I don't want to be in the loop. I want to be in the process.
Well, you will be eventually. And just a legal point, actually. I woke her up there. So, on the Brown Act, so this could get a little complicated because, you know, we all know one another. So those two people are on the steering committee. I assume that they can't share discussions before their meetings with any of the others. Would that be a Brown Act violation?
That's a good question, Vice Chair Lee. We might need to look at that in a little more detail, but I would say generally it's a good idea to avoid what could be seen as a serial meeting where
yeah, that's what I
you're
thought.
communicating sort of in a daisy chain-like approach where you end up with the commission essentially sharing information outside of the general meeting. So I think the suggestion of
Just
having...
to clarify, I just meant at our meetings, obviously, we've established that we're going to keep everyone in the loop.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
mean, outside the meetings.
That would be the perfect place for that, yeah.
How does it work if, you know, let's say there's 2 council people, 2 planning commissioners, and 2 architectural review committee member meetings, and let's say a council member and a planning commission member want to attend as a member of the public. Does that make it a public meeting or not?
Could you repeat the hypothetical?
Okay, you have your 2 members from each of your committees. So let's say that someone wants to attend as a member of the public. Can they come to the meeting and not have it be a violation of the Brown Act if they come as a member of the public?
My understanding is that the meetings are internal and not necessarily open to the public.
Oh, okay.
But if it was a public meeting, then certainly.
Then there would be a
Yeah,
problem.
but it would then be a public meeting, yeah.
Okay.
Well, thank you. We will, I know that Danielle and I are committed to bringing back information and to having an open mind on bringing new concepts to our zoning code. I know that I've talked to our esteemed director, I forgot your title, Development Services Director.
But it was the esteemed you were worried about.
Esteemed Development Services Director, and, you know, things change. And I think it's important to be able to reflect what those changes are. And a good example of being flexible and understanding those changes was what we had on the agenda today, in that industry has changed totally over the past few years. So, and I also, the other item I would say is that I purposely I was interested in the selection committee, but I knew that I also wanted to do this, and I wanted other people to have the chance. So I think that spreading things around is good for the committee, and, you know, the next assignment that comes up, I think we know who's going to do it, if he's interested. So I think we should all get a chance to volunteer for these kinds of things. So did you want to have any concluding comments?
No, I 100% agree with what you said.
If there's nothing else, we can
There
move.
is.
Yes, go ahead.
So as a future agenda item, I'm not sure how this fits in. I'm still learning all the ropes, of course. Something that has been brought to my attention several times as far as code is that there are several people, especially people who have the means, who are air conditioning their garages because it lowers wear and tear in their car, it reduces drying out of a lot of the materials, the plastics that are in cars, all that type of stuff. Now, that seems extravagant to me, but I guess if I had the money and I wanted to air condition my garage, I would, if it kept my machines operating more properly. And as we get more heat issues for more days in the desert, people who don't have the means cannot do that. So shade, those types of things become even more important. And I was been talking around my neighborhood, and one of the zoning problems in my neighborhood is that if you do have a home and you have nowhere to put your car, you're parking out on the street, or if you're at an apartment complex or anything of that sort, you have no way to provide shade for your vehicle. And like in my neighborhood particularly, you can't put a shade structure in because of the setbacks and stuff of that sort. I'm wondering if it's possible to find a way to make it so people who maybe don't have the financial means to have an expensive shade structure, or who maybe aren't in a proper zoning area to fit something that would be of more structural significance in, how do we provide shade for people who do not have, or who maybe can't because of a code thing, or who just don't have the money? So I'm putting that out there because I believe this is the point to do that. Maybe to ask staff or to continue a conversation about that.
I think for residential, I would have to give that a little bit more thought, and I think it's a good idea. You're right about the setbacks, but then there's ways to write exceptions into the setbacks for certain things. Sometimes it's if it's an open structure on three sides, different ways to accommodate that and for the shade structure. But I know that one thing that I can say that we do now is we do require the shade structures in the commercial so that people's cars don't sit in the hot sun. Before you came on the commission, the dispensary that's next to Glory to God Church, we disagreed with what they wanted to have a condition removed for a shade structure, and they brought it to the council, and the council agreed with what the planning commission said, and they had to build the structure.
Yeah, and speaking more like in line of, in my neighborhood specifically, several new homeowners would like to have something shading their cars, and there has been no possibility to do that according to our current zoning and rules. So how do we accommodate for those types of things?
So let me address this, and I'm assuming we're on item 5, discussion on future agenda items.
Yes.
So if we're on that section of code, you do have a report in your packet that looks at upcoming items that we have scheduled. This is a new tool that we're using to really track what the commission has coming before it. And then on a separate item under staff comments, we'll work on how to present this better in the future. We do have a work plan for the commission that identifies requests that the commission has made of staff for us to come back and provide updates, make reports to you. We're tracking those so that we're hearing you and that we're keeping track of those and making commitments to come back. So Commissioner Bedard's comments here on shade structures on residential properties, that's something that we can research. We can put together a staff report and bring this back for discussion at a future commission meeting. So we'll add this to the table that's listed under staff comments today. We'll add that as a work plan item, and we'll provide a summary of what the current requirements are in the code, if there's anything pertinent in the building code that you need to be aware of, and we'll provide that for the commission for discussion at a future meeting.
I think we already jumped into discussion on future agenda items. Again, I'm not going to go in this strict order. One of the things I thought about that might be good as an educational tool for the commission is to maybe have the chief building official and our city engineer do a workshop on things that are standard plan check issues, on emergency access, on handicap requirements, things such as that, so that we understand what happens during plan check. Is there any other discussion on future agenda items anybody would like to have? If there's not, we'll move on to city attorney report. What, I missed something? Wait.
Number 6.
Oh, my cheat sheet's wrong. I'm sorry.
I'm happy to jump in and share. There's no update for me, but I'm sure we can have maybe the commissioners provide reports if that's.
Well, the commissioner's report is going to be what we'll use in the future to report back on any committees that we're on or anything that we did. I think also,
it's a typo. It should say commissioners' comments. What it is this program kind of borrows from city council agendas, and so we just need to get that corrected, but it's commissioners' comments.
I was going to say that at the last presentation that Dominique Camps did, that she was talking about these classes and the CERT classes and things. Those are things we can report back on. And does anybody else have anything for number 6, commissioners' reports?
Yes. So I guess what maybe Sandra was suggesting is that commissioner reports is really just us making some comments. If we wanted something a wee bit more formal in regard to the zoning code update, maybe we need another item. I'll let you guys worry about that. The little report comment I wanted to make might overlap with staff comments in number 8. Then the work plan table in it, because there's a reference to me in the questions I had regarding the cannabis facilities and so on. And I was interested, and this may not be the appropriate point to ask, maybe number 8 or something. We know that just recently there has been a moratorium put in place regarding cannabis facilities in Cathedral City, and I was just wondering, either in Section 8 or now, if staff want to ask, just what does that mean exactly as a moratorium? How long is it for? What staff activity is happening during that moratorium process? And then how does that circle back to us, City Council? What happens, I guess? Is that something that can be asked?
So I can address that now, or I can address that under staff comments. It's really at the pleasure of the chair.
Any other items?
Well, if
Staff comments. Any other items for number 6, commissioners' reports? Okay, then we can move to number 7, city attorney report, which I think she already said she didn't have anything.
Correct.
Okay, so we could conclude that. And number 8, staff comments and I'm sorry, I'm not staff, but dovetailing on what Commissioner McPhail said, can you also add in the results of what's happened on Ramon Road with the cultivation facility and the people at International Mobile, the neighbors?
Yes, so let me share what updates I can at this point. So Commissioner McPhail is correct that there is currently a moratorium on new cannabis conditional use permits and new cannabis licenses. That moratorium went into effect at the last council meeting as an urgency item. That urgency item essentially required a 4/5 vote of the city council and making a finding that there is a pressing matter, a pressing concern, where if we continue to issue those conditional use permits, if we continue to issue those cannabis licenses, that we would only be expanding that current problem. So the problem right now, we have a proliferation of odor complaints. These are coming throughout the city, although there is a large cluster of those in the proximity of Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road as a result of a large cultivation facility in that area and its impact on the adjacent outdoor resort Palm Springs as well as other areas around that. So at the last council meeting, the council chose to enter into an interim 45-day moratorium period where we are proposing a more detailed strategy that we'll bring back to the council at their next meeting on February 26th, where the council will be asked to consider extending that moratorium for a period of time. They can extend it 2 times. This first extension would be for a year, essentially, that 45-day period plus some additional time to get to 1 year. After that, they could extend it for another year. That extension really would be to create an opportunity, a time for us to review the cannabis regulations, to propose updates to those cannabis regulations to address these concerns. And that could be the cannabis odor regulations that are in our code, what we require as conditions of approval for a cannabis CUP. It could also include zoning regulations. For instance, now we allow cultivators in the planned community commercial PCC zone district. That may be an item that we want to reconsider. So that will be brought back to the City Council February 26th for further discussion, really those areas, those sections of the code that require additional analysis and potential amendments to modernize those or to make some change that's responsive to current issues that we're experiencing in this community. That's about where we stand now. The business that is in question, they're still building out their facility. They're not impacted, at least that first phase is not impacted by the moratorium because they have an existing cannabis conditional use permit. They have cannabis licenses. They have building permits for that. So they will be allowed to build out the balance of that facility. They have been working closely with staff in terms of reviewing their odor mitigation, the odor control that they have in place. They have provided additional odor mitigation, and they're continuing to collaborate, continuing to work with staff, providing reports and information necessary to show that they are working to come into compliance with the city's codes and regulations. There are businesses, though, that are affected by this. So any new cannabis CUP, any new license, any expansion of an existing CUP or license, that would potentially be subject to that moratorium, both this interim 45-day period, and if it were to be extended by City Council, it would likely be caught up by that. This covers all cannabis uses, so cultivation, dispensaries, manufacturing, labs, all cannabis uses are affected by that moratorium.
Did we have anything in the pipeline, any applications?
There were some in the pipeline, and I would say that as we became aware of those, once we knew that this was requested by council, we did discuss those with those applicants, those that were on the cusp, so to speak, of submitting a CUP. They had a cannabis license. They were preparing themselves to submit an amendment to an existing CUP. We worked with them to understand where they were at, and there are exemptions built into that moratorium that allowed some of those to continue. For instance, we also had some existing cannabis CUPs on Bankside where those licensees went out of business. They vacated the premises. The property owner was looking to backfill those spaces with a new user. We were made aware of those new users and worked closely with them to get their license application in ahead of the moratorium date. So those that we were aware of, we worked with to get them in before the moratorium went into effect. They had relied on those regulations to date. They had worked with us to date. So they were covered by the exemption. That again, is going to be brought back to City Council on February 26th, and really it'll be in Council's hands to continue that if they choose and to evaluate that same exemption that was put into place. Those that have an existing cannabis CUP and existing cannabis license, that they're in a building permit process, they're allowed to continue. It's really new cannabis CUPs, new licenses that come in after the moratorium went into effect. The moratorium does not allow us to approve those CUPs or those licenses.
I have two questions. One, I remember at a previous Planning Commission meeting, you'd mentioned, I believe it was that facility, they were going to be implementing some sort of new type of odor reduction technology. Did that not work, or what were the results of that?
So that was installed on November 29th and inspected on December 3rd. That's a fogging system.
Oh, right.
It's oxidizing the odor-causing compounds. We have found that it has substantially reduced the odor, and this is based on staff's observations, based on our analysis after the fogging system has been installed. They've also prepared a report that shows the reduction in the cannabis odor compounds from their grow room to those external exhaust points on the building. Now, it hasn't stopped the complaints. And in fact, we've seen an increase in the complaints since it was submitted. So that is a challenge in terms of what we're observing as staff and what is being reported by the public. But we're continuing to work with the business, the operator, looking for alternatives, looking for what additional mitigation can be proposed.
Okay, and then the second question was, it does seem like from what I've seen in terms of public comment, that is kind of the central area where people are noticing the strong smell. But I've also seen people in Rancho Mirage saying that and I'm wondering, is that the same facility, or is there another facility or are we not sure that those are accurate?
Well, I think...
I was just wondering if there was another facility, because that location is very far from Rancho Mirage.
So over the course of 2024, we have received complaints throughout the city. And
Okay.
most of those are from the facility at Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road, but we have received complaints on Perez. We have received complaints from Rancho Mirage around the city hall. Those are not from C4 Industry. Those are not from the facility at Date Palm Drive and Ramon Road.
Okay, I didn't think
We
so.
have heard other complaints further to the east. Those may or may not, but I think the challenge that we have is assessing the validity of comments. And I'm not dismissing the comments that we're hearing, but in terms of the frequency, in terms of the intensity, I think there are some differences of opinion on that. There's a lot of subjectivity with cannabis odor.
Are there any other staff comments?
I do have one. Last month, based upon some input from a commission member, last month I did send an email out to the Planning Commission identifying a new development application that had come in. So the request was so that the commission was aware of new applications that were coming in that would come at some future date to the Planning Commission. And so I'm hopeful that that was received, that's the information that's requested. I do have a tickler so that every month, if we have an update of new applications, we'll provide that to the commission. And so probably within this week or next, you'll be getting a new memo.
And if I may go back to cannabis for just one more moment. When we go to council on February 26th, we will also be talking public engagement. And I think it's important to talk about that here because the Planning Commission does have a role. We are talking about amendments to Title IX, which would come through the Planning Commission. So we will be proposing a public process, public engagement. We want to hear from the broader community. We want to hear from the industry. The Planning Commission has a role in that as well as the Cannabis Task Force. So right now it's premature really to talk solutions, but I think after February 26th, if we have that endorsement from council to continue the moratorium, we can look at strategizing on what role the Planning Commission has in evaluating the current regulations and making recommendations to the Cannabis Task Force and City Council on potential ordinance changes.
If there's nothing else, we will adjourn at 7:49. Did you see that?